Balance is a practice. It's not like this ended state that you're going to achieve and just perfectly be there all the time. It's an intentional way of living your life. And even though the practice of balance can feel challenging, it's so worth it.
You are listening to the Learning to Love podcast,
where we teach you to live a happier, healthier life and manifest your desires. So the idea of balance, I feel like it gets tossed around a lot. We all know that you need balance in your life. We all know it's a good thing. But what does that actually mean? You know, what does it actually mean to have balance in your life? And how could you use the idea of balance to really help yourself get ahead and move forward and grow as a person? Those are all the questions we're going to answer right now.
When I think of balance, I always love to remind myself of the concept of integration. And I think that that can be beautifully applied to what we're going to talk about here today, because you and I are going to be talking about two polar opposites or extremes that are necessary. Both are necessary to be able to have balance. But when we think about them being necessary, it doesn't mean that we have to take away from either of them. It's just finding a helpful way to include both of them. And that's what I think of when I think of balance.
Yes, yeah. Integration is huge. And I like what you said about how it's just a way to find, or it's just like finding a way to bring two parts together and
allowing them both to be and exist in their fullest extent, but together.
Yes, exactly. Not excluding one or the other.
Yeah.
I think that's what gets a lot of people. I think that's what creates a problem for a lot of people, is they try to only focus on one or the other, but in reality, both can exist, and it's actually more beneficial for both to exist. And
that also doesn't mean that they're going to exist on a moment-to-moment basis, in the sense that they are both present and you're operating in both at the same time. I think a balanced way of living is effortless. It feels flowy. It feels a bit more easygoing than something that is more tense, something that is more controlled. Like you said, a lot of times we're controlling our ability to operate in these polar extremes. And I think a balanced way of living is just allowing them to come up and express themselves as they do in their fullest extent, which just means you're operating in your own authenticity. And then, when it passes and you shift into something else, allowing that to be in its fullest extent.
Yeah, and so with all of that being said, I feel like the way that we've kind of started to focus on the idea of balance as far as in our lives is we've kind of broken it down into 10 areas where we feel like we've noticed the most challenge in our own lives, or we've noticed the most challenge in other people's lives around us. In these 10 areas, and we kind of have been able to pinpoint, the polar opposites. And with that, I think we'll have a better understanding of how to actually create more balance in our lives, because we'll actually have somewhere to start and somewhere to focus.
Yes, so we have 10 beautiful areas to focus on for balance. These are areas of your life that may feel really painful right now. If you're super out of balance, it may feel painful if those parts of your lives are super unbalanced, or it could just be an area of your life that you can actually elevate by intentionally focusing on balancing these parts of your lives. So kind of shifting from maybe a state where you've been doing all right in the balance department, but you're kind of just operating in a more unconscious way. Today we're going to show you where you can intentionally focus your energy in these 10 different areas of your life. And I promise that by doing so, you will either alleviate pain or just improve your quality of life.
Along with everything, we've also been working on a free resource that we're going to be providing to everybody that is going to involve these 10 areas of balance, and it's going to just really break things down in a simple way for everyone to be able to use and to be able to pinpoint the areas of balance that you want to work on in your life. And it's it's just designed to be super easy and helpful, and so that's something that we're going to be coming out with.
And just to add, not only does this resource help you find balance, but it also clearly shows you those 10 different areas that we're going to talk about today. And it gives you really clear examples for each of those 10 different areas of your life that you can kind of start to think about balancing out. And I think the helpful part of that is that it's just going to really help give you that awareness, and that awareness is needed to help you create change and impact in your life. So not only are we going to help you impact your life by giving you the tools that you need to create balance, we're also going to help you identify where you're at and give you that awareness to make that positive change. Okay, so number 1 is one that I feel very excited about, because I feel like when I first learned about this, when I first learned about looking at my life in these two polar different ways, my entire life changed. So it's just this idea of thinking about the physical world and your internal world. And when I first heard that term, internal world, I was blown away. It felt like magic when I first heard it. Internal world, for anyone that hasn't heard that term, it's this idea of everything that lives inside of you. It has to do with your emotions, your mental body, so things like your thoughts.
Things that are non-physical, things that you can't see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. It's just, the things that are obviously existing, but not in the physical reality.
Yes, love that. It also has to do with that term higher self, if you've heard that before. It has to do with your soul. When you think about your internal world, you think about your own energy. You think about how your energy is feeling, and you think about, am I operating in my most authentic way? Do I feel my own genuine energy? And the way that you can kind of start to help give some love to that part of your life is by asking yourself, how can I take care of my soul? And then on the flip side of things, there's your physical world, everything that exists there. So that's your physical body. That could be your finances.
Yeah, and then just like, career or your home life or your relationships to the people around you. It's just anything that exists on the external world.
Yes, the role that you play in society. I love that one. And then it also has to do with how you care for your physical objects. So these other physical things in your life. How are you treating the universe at large? How are you treating other people in the world? Because when you really get down to it, other people, things in the universe, that's all an extension of you. And so I think the way that you can kind of start to dive into thinking about caring for the physical world is by really thinking about how are you treating things outside of you, which includes your body, your hair, your skin. It includes so much.
Yeah, and something that we want to talk about in all of these 10 areas is the unhealthy extremes. Because if we are off balance, then we are going to be either focusing way too much on one and not focusing on the other, or vice versa. And for this particular one, it could look like, for example, you are very physically focused. You focus on your job, you focus on your physical health, you focus on what you eat, you focus on finances, you focus on the relationships with the people around you maybe, but if you are leaning too much into that and not paying enough attention to your internal world and to just your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings and everything that's going on within you, then that can really throw you off. And same thing with vice versa.
Yeah, on the flip side of things, I think that, many people that first start learning about spirituality, for example, that kind of links back to like non-physical identification, your spirit, your soul, your higher self. When you start learning about that, it can be really exciting to dive fully in, and I support that. And also, I feel like I've noticed myself, or I've watched other people kind of detach themselves from taking care of their physical health or their physical body or what's going on in the outer world. It can become easy to feel lost in one or the other. And it's so important to have that balance and have that integration of giving love to each of these parts of you, because that is what is going to create your most loving and authentic form of yourself. Because in this case, you are the non-physical and you are the physical. You are both. And this concept can be applied to all of the things, because all of the things that we're going to talk about today, the 10 big areas of our life that each have these polar ends, we are all of those things. And we need to be expressing ourselves in all of those areas to be feeling happy and confident and fulfilled with ourselves and where we're at in life. And I think if you just spend your time focusing on one and not really giving any kind of love or attention to the other, you're going to notice that something feels off. It's going to feel like something's missing. Something's just not going to feel right, and it's not going to feel good. And I promise that you will feel your best when you're giving attention and care and love to all of these areas and the polar opposite ends of these areas.
Yes, and I think that something to mention as well is the idea that balance does not necessarily mean 50-50, because in a lot of these areas that we're going to be talking about, for different people and depending on where you're at in your life and just, on a moment-to-moment basis, it's going to make more sense to focus on one over the other, and it might not come out as 50-50, but there is going to be a balance when you're able to intentionally include both parts. You're going to find a place where it feels good to be focusing, a certain amount of energy on one part and focusing a certain amount of energy on the other part. It's going to feel like clarity. It's going to feel like peace. And like you said, it's going to, if you're not in that area, it's going to feel like something is off.
I think it's important to mention that this idea of balance is very dynamic, in the sense that throughout your life, your idea or like recipe for balance could definitely change. And so it's important to always be coming back to checking in with yourself and reflecting on, do I feel balanced in these areas? Why do I feel balanced? What am I doing that is helping me feel balanced? And, if something has changed and you notice that you're not feeling balanced in a certain area, that's okay. I feel like balance is a practice. It's not like this ended state that you're going to achieve and just perfectly be there all the time. It's an intentional way of living your life. And even though the practice of balance can feel challenging, it's so worth it. What you get from practicing that makes the challenge and the hardship of this practice worth it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I like what you said about just the idea that it's not like there's a certain point where you have been fully balanced in all areas of your life. I think that it's a constant process to be checking in with yourself and seeing where you're at in all of these different areas. And I think that that's part of the reason why this resource that we're creating is going to be so helpful, because it kind of just, it's all laid out there in front of you. So you could kind of just look at it and glance at it and say, am I balanced there? Am I balanced there? Am I balanced there? Rather than just living your life and feeling like, oh, something is off, I don't know what it is. Like, this is something that is going to be super helpful.
It definitely is something that you can use more than one time. And I think that's the goal, just consistently coming back and checking in with yourself and, going through the checklist and seeing like, oh, does this part of my life feel balanced? No. Okay, let me tweak that. But it's definitely designed to be something that you can use over and over again, as much or as little as you please.
Yeah, exactly. And with that being said, let's just go ahead and move on to number 2. I feel like now that we've kind of laid out the whole big picture, we should be able to move through the next one pretty quick. So the second area of balance is comfort and challenge. And I love this, and we actually talked about this in one of the past episodes, but it's super great to keep in mind that on one end, you do want to be challenging yourself. You want to be making sure that you're doing things that are pushing you to your limits. You want to make sure that you're doing things that kind of force you to grow and learn and get uncomfortable a little bit. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you definitely want to make sure that you are giving yourself space to relax and rest and take a break when you need it, and just be comfortable every now and then. Because again, either end of the spectrum, if you're focusing too much on one or the other, you could kind of see how that would lead to some not so pleasant results.
Yeah. When I hear the words comfort and challenge, I think about some of the needs that we as humans have. On one end, challenge makes me think of growth, and that is like one of the top 5 human needs that we have. And then on the other end is comfort, and that makes me think of safety. That makes me think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, safety is the number one first thing that you need in order to really experience any of the other needs. And so I feel like when I think about it like that, it just reminds me how important both are. And it just makes me want to really give attention to both.
Yeah, just to give an idea of what the unhealthy extremes might look like. If you're leaning too much on the comfort side, you're not challenging yourself enough, you're not growing, you're kind of just staying in your comfort zone, you're kind of just doing what you can to make sure that things are not changing, and you're not really putting yourself into any uncomfortable positions. You're slowing yourself down, you're actually hurting yourself. In the long run, what this does is it puts you in a place of resisting change. And change is something that is absolutely guaranteed on this earth. And so if you are resisting change, you're resisting life. If you're resisting life, you're going to have a very unpleasant experience. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you are constantly pushing yourself, challenging yourself, being very uncomfortable, not focusing on giving yourself a break or focusing on your safety, that could also be really negative to your health and your overall energy. Because like what you were saying, like, we need safety. Like, that is one of our top priorities. Like, you need food, water, shelter. Like, if you don't have those things, you're not going to be able to thrive, and you're not going to be able to be your most productive self.
And you need to feel safe in order to feel vulnerable, in order to be able to connect with the people that you love. You need to have this feeling of safety that can then lead you into expressing your energy in other ways. If you feel unsafe, you're just going to be stuck in fight or flight mode. And I do not think that anyone can operate as their best selves in flight or flight mode. Also, I think that if you stay stuck in comfort, right, like you're swinging way to the end of comfort, I don't think that you would ever be able to tap into the feeling that we all love, which is confidence. We love embodying confidence, and we can't do that if we're not challenging ourselves. Confidence comes from overcoming things that felt hard for us. It gives us this sense of, wow, I feel proud. Wow, like, I'm so cool, I did that. Like, that's amazing. Like, we really tend to build our own selves up when we've gone through challenge.
Yes, that is such a good point. Love that.
Number 3 on our list is one that I am currently practicing balancing. This is the idea of respecting yourself, respecting your own preferences, desires, respecting the own thoughts that you have. And then also on the flip side of things, respecting others' thoughts and preferences and desires, and finding a way to have both. And I think if anyone feels like they've ever identified as a people pleaser, this can be one that would probably be a great place for you to start intentionally practicing balancing. I think if anyone wants to cultivate feelings of self-worth and feelings of self-trust, even for themselves, being able to express themselves authentically, you're going to need to learn how to respect your own thoughts and preferences and opinions. Just respect anything going on inside of you. And then on the flip side of things, also being able to acknowledge what's going on with another person. I think that if you lean way to the other side of, respecting yourself, that's awesome. That feels so challenging for me sometimes. But it also cuts off connection. It cuts off your ability to share connection with another human being. And that is such a precious thing. And I think that honestly, genuinely, if you want to have a deeply connected relationship, if you want to connect vulnerably with another person, if you want another person to hold you and all that you are, you have to be able to do that with the other person too. And that is going to require you to show up as your most vulnerable, authentic version of yourself. It's going to require you to respect that. And then it's also going to require you to hold that same space for another person. And when both people can come and do that together, that's when real connection happens. And I think that that is what we all want. Connection is the number one top human need. It is more important than our physical need of food and water. Yeah, this one is so important for me. I would love to pass it on to you because genuinely you have helped me so much in this department. You have helped me really learn to acknowledge what I want and what I need. And I think we have an episode on that. Mm-hmm. You've helped me be able to identify that, and you've helped me be able to express that. And you've been such a great model in my life for what that looks like and how that is actually helpful to other people. Like, it's more helpful to respect yourself and to voice your own thoughts and your preferences. It's helpful in your relationships more than it is to hide and just kind of bend yourself to be an exact mirror and replica of the other person. Yeah. So I would love to pass it on and hear what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say I'm super proud of you for the growth that you've been able to achieve in that area, and just for being vulnerable right now. I really appreciate that. And yeah, this definitely is a tough area, I think, for a lot of people. And like what you were saying, it does make a big impact if you are leaning more to one side or the other. And specifically, if you are focusing very much on your own thoughts and your own preferences, then you really, like you were saying, you create room to be able to connect with people, and you create room to be able to really work on integration, like what we were talking about earlier. And then I think on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you are focusing too much on what other people want, how other people feel, what other people are thinking, then it could get to the point where you are disregarding your own thoughts and your own feelings and your own preferences. And like personally, like being around that is tough, because I personally like to know what other people want and what other people think. And when other people don't want to talk about it, it's hard to know what decision to make, because I'm trying to make a decision that feels good for everyone. But if other people are trying to only make their preferences based on what you want, then you don't know what's good for everyone. And it's hard to make a decision that actually feels good for everyone. So
it's painful for you, and it's painful for the person that is completely giving up themselves in that moment, giving up their preferences and opinions. So it's painful for both people. And I think that narcissism and people pleasing is such a great example of what happens when you are on the polar ends of the spectrum and you're not choosing to practice balancing things out.
Yeah, exactly. So balancing those out, super important. And so for our fourth area of balance, we have honoring your future plans, as well as honoring the way that you feel in each moment. So honoring your future plans is going to be things like setting goals, making plans, being organized, and sticking with your commitments and your schedule. And then honoring the way that you're feeling is going to be things like allowing yourself space to be free flowing and spontaneous and make a last minute decision if that feels necessary. And so the polar ends of the spectrum for this, as far as like an unhealthy sense, maybe you could already see it, maybe not, but if you are focusing too much on your future plans and you're not giving yourself respect for how you're feeling in each moment, you're going to get seriously burnt out. You're going to get stressed out. Things are going to get really tough and really frustrating, and you're going to feel like you want to quit.
And you're never really going to be living your life and enjoying your life.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all of these things of balance are meant to help you enjoy your life and live your life. But yeah, this one's specifically super, super important. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have just honoring how you're feeling in each moment. If you lean too much to that side, that's just when you start to dip into some trouble. Like imagine that you live your life, you have no plans, you have no organization, you don't have any goals, like you just live moment to moment and you just make every decision in the moment, the way that you're feeling. Like that is going to lead to some very, very stressful moments, because having that balance, it's so important and it's so necessary to be living like a peaceful and free-flowing life.
And this one can also be linked back to confidence and self-esteem when you look at the one end of the spectrum, which is honoring your future plans. It's great to have goals. It's great to have these things that you're working towards and that you're planning to be able to achieve something. That is going to help you feel really, really good about yourself. That is going to help build your esteem. That is going to help build your self-trust. It's so good to have goals and to be practicing achieving those just as much as it is to be freely expressing yourself in the moment and getting a feel for your own genuine energy. And this one also makes me think of me and you, because I think that you and I operate naturally a little bit on the polar ends of the spectrum, but we use each other to help ourselves come into balance. Just as with number 3, when we were talking about respecting ourselves and respecting others, I have used you and the way that you operate on a daily basis to help me come into balance. And so I think if anyone's wanting to come into balance in an area where they feel off balance, look around at the people that you have in your life, or maybe someone that you feel like you really respect on social media even, and use their energy, their authenticity, the way that they show up in the world. Use that as something to inspire yourself to try doing something that you see working. And then just also remember that even if someone else has something really great going on for themselves in one area, you have these other skills and these other natural ways of being that someone else can use, and look at you as a model in the same way that you might look at someone else.
Yes, that is so awesome that you brought that up. That's like just using other people as a resource. That is one of the best tools that you could possibly have for when it comes to any of these areas of balance. If you are too far off to one end or the other, just look at someone who's living on the other end. See what kind of things they're doing. See what kind of beliefs they might have. See what kind of thoughts they might have. And just do what you can to try to work your way into some more balance. But one thing I want to say now that I think about it is be careful to make sure that you're not doing a pendulum swing, which is where, you're focusing too much on one over the other. And so you start to focus way on the other one and you completely forget about the one that you were just focusing on. And now you're still in the unhealthy extreme, but you're just on the opposite end. And so if you are using other people as a resource, just make sure that you're being aware of that idea of the pendulum swing and try to keep yourself in the balance by finding some middle ground that feels good.
Love that. And if you've noticed that you've already done a pendulum swing, that's okay. I feel like exactly where you are at right now is perfect for gathering information, for assessing and reflecting and just gaining insight from, in this case, if you have done the pendulum swing, Now you have insight from both perspectives, and you can really practice integrating the two together. So it's okay to be wherever you are at right now.
Love that.
Number 5 might be my absolute top favorite area to focus on. I literally want to get a tattoo that represents what this means to me. It's this idea of acknowledging your dark truth and then acknowledging your light, acknowledging the positive things about you, and then acknowledging, you could call it the negative, you could call it your areas of growth, but it is these two polar ends of the spectrum. And I think that both are so important. And just like how we talked about with the physical and the non-physical, you are both. You are both darkness and lightness. Those are both you, and everyone has darkness, everyone has lightness. When you can acknowledge both, that is the most self-loving thing that you can do for yourself, and that is the thing that is going to help you excel, like exponentially. Being able to recognize, these are my strengths, I'm going to capitalize on those, I'm going to make sure I keep expressing those, I'm going to build up my self-worth and my self-confidence by like appreciating those about myself. And then on the flip side of things, knowing your weaknesses, knowing where you can grow is so valuable, because that's kind of like where your challenges are, right? Challenge helps you feel more confident when you overcome those things. Challenge helps you build up your self-trust, your self-respect, and that in and of itself helps you build a more solid basis for your own feelings of self-worth. And so I think this is just my favorite thing ever to focus on, and I love it.
Yeah, me too. This is definitely one of my favorites too. And I think something that I want to add is it's just as important to focus on your own light and dark as it is to focus on other people's light and dark.
I really love that.
Because this, everyone has it, like you just said. And I've noticed that some unhealthy extremes would be like people who only see the good in people. And so they might get into a very toxic relationship.
I'm laughing because this is an area of growth for me. I very much highlight people and their goodness, and sometimes that leads to me not even looking at the things that may be harmful to other people or to me. I just like to really appreciate people.
Yeah, and I mean, on the other end, I have an area of growth here as well, because I'm really good at seeing where people make mistakes, where people need to grow, where people need to learn, where they have their lessons. Like I can look at anyone and tell exactly what it is, the lesson that they need to learn and what's wrong with them and what the problems are. And it's, on that end of the spectrum, that can create a lot of just pushing people away and just ending relationships early and just cutting things off without giving them a chance. And so we really do help each other balance those things out, because we both lived on the opposite ends for a very long time.
I like to call these things our superpowers. And I think that in and of itself is just noticing the positive about ourselves and, taking this appreciation for these strengths that we have. And so I guess that's an example of, one part of this idea of balancing this area of your life. If you're someone that struggles to look at your weaknesses and acknowledge that, or look at your shadows and acknowledge those, or someone that has a hard time with that, I think the thing that helped me the most was using loving awareness to look at both the positive things about myself and my areas of growth and my darkness. Looking at and feeling your darkness does not have to be this terribly horrific thing. It can actually be something so beautiful. And I think when you really dive into your darkness, it's funny, you actually start to feel lighter. You start to feel better about yourself, because these parts of ourselves that we consider our shadows just want to feel seen. They just want to be acknowledged and appreciated for what they are. And naturally, those things start to change when you do give that loving energy and attention to those parts of yourself and to other people. It is one of the most healing things ever to look at another person and hold them in a space of empathy and care and appreciation and just accept them for all that they are.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And just on a final note there, another thing to keep in mind when focusing on your shadows or your darkness or someone else's is that these are not just things that you want to get rid of. These things have extreme value. And a lot of times our shadows serve a very large and positive purpose in us, but the way that we look at them can make us not see that. And so our shadows have value. Our negative parts of us have value. Everything that we do for ourselves or for someone else is trying to protect us or keep us safe or make us feel good. Ultimately, what we all want and what all the parts of us want is peace.
That is such a beautiful perspective. It literally brought tears to my eyes, and like a very calm feeling has washed over my body. I loved that.
I'm glad. So number 6 on the areas of balance is independence and dependence. And that sounds kind of funny, but it's just the idea of you can meet a lot of your own needs. You can give to yourself. You can focus on yourself. That is super, super important to be independent. Be able to just like spend time by yourself, be able to spend time alone, just in silence with yourself and with everything that is within you. And at the same time, it is super, super important to recognize that we can't live on this earth without other people. We are dependent on everyone around us. Everyone serves a purpose, and it is extremely important and valuable to have other people in your lives that serve some kind of purpose.
Yeah. On one end of the spectrum, we don't do well being by ourselves. We actually do need other human beings to survive. It goes back to that idea that connection is our number one human need, even more important than food and water. We need other people and the connection that we share with other people to survive. That's true. And then on the other side of things, we need to spend time with our own selves and our own energy to really feel our own selves and our energy. Like, we enjoy when we learn about ourselves. That's why we like to talk about ourselves. We make new connections about ourselves. We learn about what we do like and what we don't like and why. It's that same idea of, people after a long weekend of going out and spending time with their friends saying they just need to go home and recharge. It's that idea that we have this social battery that can be recharged by pouring energy into ourselves. It's that idea of filling up your own cup before you go and fill others. We need both. We absolutely need both to be our best, most authentic, most loving and kind and happy, genuine selves.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you just said at the very end there, our most genuine selves, like I think that's where the independence comes in. Like, for you to even know yourself and to know what you like and what your preferences are, and kind of back to the other part of balance that we were talking about, like, you need to have that independent time. You need to have time away from other people. You need to have solitude by yourself, alone. And so the unhealthy extremes of this, I just want to real quick touch on those. So on one end, you have the person who is always constantly with other people, whether that's in a relationship or just like as a single person, like just somebody who cannot be alone by themselves for any amount of time, always has to be talking on the phone with someone, texting someone, or just with another person. Like, that is extremely unhealthy because of that fact that you need to get in touch with yourself. You need to get in touch with your own preferences, your own desires, your own thoughts, and you need to just have like some silence and some stillness. And then, on the other end of the spectrum, there are people who completely shut out other people as much as they possibly can, they don't like other people, the social battery thing. They just say, I don't have the energy to be able to talk to other people, whatever. That can be really harmful too, because we need connection. Like you were saying, like connection is our number one need, above food, above water. Like if we do not have connection in our lives, we are absolutely miserable. So both are super important.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I'm noticing as we speak about these 10 different areas of our lives, these 10 different areas to balance out in our lives, is that for anyone that may swing to different sides of the pendulum, there's very clear blocks that are being experienced when you're on either side of the pendulum. And the purpose of our podcast is to be showing you how to release those blocks and fill that space with something more genuine and authentic. And so I'm excited to keep making episodes with you, because this is just some really valuable information to be sharing with everyone. And to be honest, it's a win-win, because it's so helpful for me to be sitting here and reminding myself of these ideas, and to be reminding myself of, what I've learned, and then just to be listening to you speak and to be learning from you as well. And that actually brings us to number 7, is this idea of both teaching and learning. And that is life. I'm going to apply this first to relationships, because that is where I first learned about balancing this part of my life, was applying it to my romantic relationships. I heard before that, having a partner and being in a relationship is both like being the teacher and being the student. It's this idea of teaching someone how to love you, and then also learning how to love another person. And it's just kind of this idea of being in these two different roles all the time. So you are being the teacher, you are sharing what you know, you are sharing your awareness, and then also you are opening yourself up to learning and to receiving information from another perspective. And the more perspectives that you can see and experience, the more beautiful of a life you're going to live. We are such dynamic beings, and this universe is so complex. Like, this universe at large is so complex. And then also we as individuals are so multifaceted. And so when applying this idea and area of balance to yourself, it's this idea of being open to, learning about yourself, and then also being open to teaching yourself new ways of being. And I think that whole perspective can be extended out into everything and anything. If you want to have a beautiful relationship with anything, whether it's a beautiful relationship with you, the person sitting across from me, or the neighbor across the street, or this tree behind me, it's going to take learning about this other thing and what it needs and how it needs to be loved.
Yeah, and I think just to dive straight into the unhealthy extremes of that, you have on one end of the spectrum, whether it's with yourself or with other people or both, people who just think that they know everything. They want to give advice. They want to teach. They just are always talking. They always want to be guiding other people, but they don't take the time to ever listen. They don't ever take the time to really hear other people. They don't take the time to understand, to learn. And so it's a very closed-minded perspective, and it really blocks out a lot of learning potential that could be very, very beneficial. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have people who are always trying to learn, but they don't ever feel like they really know anything. They don't feel like they can really teach anyone. They don't really feel like they can give advice. They are not very wise. Like, it's kind of almost like putting your self-confidence down when you are just always in a place of learning, but you are never willing to go and teach anybody. Kind of like a lot of the other things we were talking about, like it builds confidence. It builds just that trust of yourself that you know what you're talking about. And then on the other end of the spectrum, learning gives you that humbleness. It gives you that ability to just kind of take a step back and say, okay, I don't know everything, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think when you think about this area of life, teaching and learning, there's a kind of beauty that you get to experience when you do integrate both into your life. And my favorite example of that beauty that can be experienced is when I hear parents talk about the relationship that they have with their kids. Or, you know, for me, I get to live this. I'm teaching in a classroom with kids. So it's this idea that, like, as the role of a parent or as the role of a teacher, you do really take on this idea of, like, I'm the educator, I'm going to teach what I know. But, like, kids have this amazing way of being able to teach you the most simple yet powerful things. And so even though I'm spending my time in the role of a teacher, or a parent maybe in the role of the caregiver, they are getting to be humbled, like you said, and they are getting to learn these beautiful things from, you know, someone that is honestly not even trying to be in that role. It's so beautiful how effortless that happens. And then I think the same type of dynamic can happen with animals and nature.
Yeah, exactly. Like the idea of learning from nature or animals, it's kind of just that idea that you could always learn. There's something to learn in everything. You could watch a tree just sit there and grow, and you could learn a lot just by focusing on learning. And so, yeah, I definitely see what you're talking about. So number 8 is going to be the balance between following rules and breaking rules. And this could also be known as compliance or rebellion. And again, these are the two opposite ends of the spectrum. So obviously you want to be able to have both. If you lean too much to the compliance side of things, meaning you follow all the rules to the T, you never, ever, ever go outside of the rules. Here's the thing. We all know that the rules do not work for everyone. There's not one box that you can fit every single person into. There is not one rule that you can set on the whole entire world that everyone is going to agree with. And so if you were to follow every single rule to the T, you're going against yourself. You're shutting yourself out. You're shutting out the parts of you that don't agree with the rules. And that can be really damaging, because if you're suppressing different parts of yourself, that just has a bunch of different negative consequences down the road. And then on the other end of the spectrum, when it comes to breaking rules, when it comes to going outside of the box, when it comes to doing things outside of what would normally be expected, you also want to be careful, because if you are leaning too much to that side, if you are not following the rules at all, if you just completely hate rules, you hate being in the box, and you just do everything you can to be outside of the box and do everything you can to break the rules, then that can be very damaging, because the rules are there for a purpose, and they are there with good intentions usually. And it's just another one of those things, super important, obviously, to find a balance there, because when you have that balance of being able to know and trust when to follow the rules and when to break the rules, when to bend the rules, when to go outside of the rules, just understanding that there is no black and white and everything is gray, that's when you can really live your life in a very peaceful and flowing way. And you know, you're always going to experience those situations where maybe you broke the rules a little too much and you're going to get a slap on the hand, or maybe you followed the rules too much when you should have bent them, and then you're going to also experience the consequences of that. But overall, definitely want to balance that area.
To be fully transparent, this was one that I was very excited for you to share about, because I feel like you have demonstrated a lot of growth in this department. And I feel like personally, I recognize that this is definitely an area of growth for me to be balancing out this part of life, because Yeah, I feel like I am just now starting to dip into what it looks like to break the rules a bit. Like, I am a rule follower to a T. I use the little tongs to grab my bread out of out of the hotel, whatever that is called.
With the bagels.
Yeah, I use it to grab it because like I'm concerned about other people feeling upset. I feel like I'm very much in the student role, and I have felt actually pretty excited to get to this part of the episode and hear from you, hear the ideas that you have to share, because right now I am just in a phase and a state where I'm just soaking up information, and I'm, watching people that are able to kind of dip into both, because I definitely lean to the side of the spectrum of a rule follower, and I've been that way since I was a kid.
Okay, well, I mean, we just talked about kind of the consequences of if you were to just continue following the rules all the time. So maybe I can just ask you that question. Do you think that it's beneficial to follow the rules every single time, no matter what, even if you don't agree with them?
I think that sometimes it feels really, really uncomfortable to follow the rules because, like you said, the rules do not always work for everyone. I think it was like the third thing that we talked about, respecting ourselves and respecting others. I lean to the side of respecting others. And yes, this is an area that I feel like I've gotten a lot better at. I'm closer to being balanced in this area than I am when it comes to compliance and rebellion. But yeah, for me, like the block is people pleasing. I think that is the biggest block for both of these areas of life. And I am so like deeply concerned with what other people think about me. We actually have a whole episode on people pleasing, and I think it's really good. There were some really huge, like in the moment breakthrough connections that were made that just completely rocked the way that I think about people pleasing. And it has actually helped me choose my own authentic form of expression over choosing to people please ever since we did that episode. And I think that is probably what I would need to bring into this idea of breaking the rules a bit.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's a good question you can ask yourself, and a good thing to just be aware of is just the idea of like, can you actually please everybody? Can you actually make everybody happy? Because when you think about it this way, regardless of what decision you make, knowing that there are always going to be people on both opposing sides, you're always disappointing somebody, no matter what decision you make. And so no matter how hard you try, you cannot make other people happy. You cannot force other people to feel a certain way. And even if you are able to give someone what they want in one moment, it's very possible that in another moment you're going to disappoint them. And so I feel like with that idea in mind, you might as well be authentic. You might as well do what you want. You might as well, have your own opinions and break the rules every now and then. But then you also just have to keep that part in mind that if it's possible, if you can meet other people's preferences, if you can follow the rules, if that feels good for you, do it.
Number 9 has to do with trust. Trusting yourself and trusting the universe. The universe could be other people. And it also has to do with this idea of control. There's only so much that you as a physical human being can control. And when you are able to delegate that control, you're going to feel a lot lighter. I think my favorite way to think about this area of life is committing to this practice of identifying my own part and my own control that I have on my situation, or maybe it's something that I'm trying to change or attract into my life. I only have so much control of that. So I love to identify my part and commit my energy to taking action on my part. And then I love to think about, okay, what is the part of the universe? And then it just kind of brings you to this idea of support. The universe can support you and the changes that you want to make and the dreams that you have, but you just have to give this trust and faith
to the universe to kind of do its thing, or maybe God or whatever you believe in. So if you're able to acknowledge what your part is and what the universe's part is, you're going to have a much more easy breezy way of navigating your own life.
Yeah. And I want to just give an example. So the other day we went to a hotel, and there happened to be 2 hotels with the exact same name very close to each other. One of them was brand new. One of them was built in the 80s, something like that. And so, we're at this brand new hotel and we're like, wow, this is amazing. We got a super good deal. And then the people are there telling us, oh, we don't have your reservation. And so basically what we had to do in that moment is they gave us the option. They said, okay, well, you can go and try to cancel your reservation, and then you could book a stay at this hotel, or you could obviously just go stay at your hotel. And so we spent about 30 minutes, maybe 45, trying to do everything that we possibly can to get this reservation canceled. First of all, we didn't have internet, so we had to talk to people, try to find the Wi-Fi, try to get connected to the Wi-Fi, try to even find the phone number that we needed to call. Once we called the phone number, waiting on hold, trying to talk to a person, and then talking to a person, and just, there were so many different things that I had to physically do as far as like my part. And then it came to a point where they couldn't cancel the reservation. And so like at that point, that's where it's beyond my control. If I were to have continued trying to change that thing that I could not control, that I didn't have control over, that would have seriously upset me. That would have just really messed with the whole vibe. That would have just ruined the whole entire day. But what I ended up doing is I just acknowledged, I did everything I possibly could. I sat in this lobby for 45 minutes. And I called all these different people, and I said everything I could possibly say. I did everything I could possibly do to try to make this work out, and it didn't. And so with that being said, it was just like, I'm fine to acknowledge that I did my part. I feel really good about that. I trust that, this is just not the way that things were going to work out, because there was absolutely nothing else I can do. And so just recognizing when you get to that point, there's certain things that you can and cannot control. And if you try to control things that are outside of your control, it's going to be really uncomfortable. It's going to be really hard. You're going to be really frustrated. But if you just focus on what you can control and the things that you actually can do, you're focusing on your own power, your own personal power, and you build that confidence, things start to feel good.
I loved that example.
I just want to give one more quick example. So there's this idea of locking your car and hiding your valuables, and then also just trusting that nothing bad is going to happen to your car. So like if you are just fully trusting the universe, but you're not doing anything on your own part, you leave your car unlocked, you leave a pile of cash sitting on your, on your dashboard or whatever, like obviously you're not doing your part. There's a good chance your car is going to get broken into. And on the other hand, if you are not trusting the universe, maybe you lock your car, you have a steering wheel lock, you put a camera in there, you're going through all these different extremes to try to control the situation. And then what happens if your car gets broken into? You're going to be super, super upset because you thought that you had control and you actually don't. And so, yeah, it's just that idea of trusting the universe to do its part and to do whatever it's going to do, and then also just doing your part, whatever that might look like.
Service and love.
Yes. So number 10 is service and self-love. So this one is awesome because you have this idea of serving other people, of giving to the world, of going out of your way to make sure that you are helping others and the things around you. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have giving love to yourself, meeting your own needs, doing what feels good for you, even if it, doesn't really help anybody else. These are super, super important because just looking at like the unhealthy extremes, people who just fully dedicate their lives to service, right? These people are always, always, always focused on just helping other people, just giving and giving and giving and giving and giving. And there comes a point where it's like, I think you mentioned this earlier, it's like filling up your own cup so that you can give to other people. If you are always giving to other people and you're not giving to yourself, the value that you actually have to give is going to be much less significant and much less valuable than if you were to be balancing that idea of giving to yourself, filling your own cup, doing what's good for yourself, and then also giving to other people. That is what creates the most balance. But yeah, if you're on the other end of the spectrum, then you have the people who are just completely selfish. They don't want to give to anyone because they are only worried about filling up their own cup. They're worried that they're not going to have enough. They're worried that things are going to get taken away from them. It's like a very lack mindset, and you can see how that can be really harmful in your life in general.
Let's bring this back to our basic needs. If you go and research the top 5 human needs, 2 out of 5 of those needs are being met through focusing on balancing this area of your life. When you think of service, you are meeting your need for connection. When you think of self-love, you're meeting your need of significance. You're giving attention to yourself when you practice self-love, and that makes you feel important and significant. And that even makes you feel connected to yourself. So 3 of these needs are being met.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously this area of balance, along with all of the other areas that we just talked about, are super, super important, super, super valuable. They help us meet our needs. They help us grow and learn and become the best versions of ourselves, and they help us create peace in our lives. And so that's just super important to keep these areas of balance in mind, and also check out that resource that we're creating. It is seriously going to help you out a lot.
Thanks so much for listening.
We really appreciate you for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode.